I want to close by responding to an argument made recently by Timothy Geithner, the Secretary of the United States Treasury. The argument he made was to the effect that we in Congress are essentially mere surplus when it comes to the debt limit increase. He made the argument that, as I understand it, Section 4 of the 14th Amendment somehow independently authorizes the executive branch, perhaps the Treasury Secretary, perhaps just the President, to somehow raise the debt limit without consulting Congress, without an act of Congress in place. That argument is not accurate. That argument is based on an improper reading of the 14th Amendment. The language to which he refers reads in pertinent part as follows: "The validity of the public debt of the United States, authorized by law, shall not be questioned." Adopted in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, this provision simply acknowledges the fact that we can't ignore our debt obligations, that when interest or principal come due on our national debt, those things have to be honored. You notice that in the middle of it, set off by commas, is the phrase that says authorized by law. To create law in this country, you have to move something through Congress. That something has to be presented to the President for signature or veto. You can't make a law in the United States government without Congress. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 2 makes that point clear by giving the authority to Congress to incur debt in the name of the United States. So necessarily, by definition, by operation of the plain text of the Constitution, you cannot raise the debt limit without an act of Congress. If anything, Section 4 of the 14th Amendment simply makes clear that which I wish Secretary Geithner would acknowledge, and I hereby call upon him to acknowledge, which is that he has a legal and a moral obligation to make sure that if the debt limit is not increased, during whatever time that it remains in limbo, during whatever time that we face a debt limit-induced shortfall, it is his obligation as the Secretary of the Treasury to use the first tax revenues coming in the door to pay our debt obligations, to pay the interest that's being accrued on our national debt. It's his obligation not only as a fiduciary or quasi-fiduciary, but also under the very provision of the Constitution. Section 4 of the 14th Amendment, the same provision that he cites, binds his hands and requires him to make sure that that interest gets paid, prohibits him from bringing about a default on our national debt, which is what he's been threatening on many occasions. There is a way forward. The circumstances in which we now find ourselves are, to be sure, threatening. They are intimidating, they are daunting, and they are circumstances that bring about a substantial amount of disagreement within this body and within the body that meets just down the hall from us. But there are answers, there are solutions to which we can agree. I believe that the Cut, Cap, Balance Act provides the proper solution, and it's a solution that can appeal to liberals and conservatives alike, to Democrats and Republicans alike. And I call on all within the sound of my voice to take a careful look at this legislation, to jump on board and become part of the solution. Thank you, Mr. President.